Hey everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomenon, and this video is going to be a highlight reel from the Engaging the Phenomenon podcast, and it's going to specifically be focusing on the subject of contact. So it's going to cover a number of the interviews that we've had on Engaging the Phenomenon podcast this year, with different guests talking about contact in general, maybe some of their contact experiences, and also kind of like the bigger picture of contact. So I hope you appreciate this. And just for people watching and listening now, we created a Patreon so you can help support the channel. There is a lot coming this year, and I hope you guys appreciate this highlight reel. And the link, there's going to be links in the description to the original interviews if you want to go back and watch the full interview. So I hope you appreciate this, guys.
So I started reading about the subject. About a year later, I decided I'd get my courage to go up to my first UFO meeting, and it was June 1992. And who did I find but a tall, bearded emergency room doctor. I was doing ER at the time. And he said his name was Dr. Stephen Greer, and had developed a technique to attract UFOs to secure research sites as part of a citizens' diplomatic initiative with the so-called extraterrestrials. So a little light went on. Citizens diplomacy, huh? So I got quite interested. There were many similarities between Dr. Greer and myself. We both were working emergency room. We both had young children at home, and we both married Jewish women who were, in his case, 5 years older than him, and my wife, Yael, is 6 years older than me. So there were kind of interesting similarities, but the differences was when I was a student activist, he was into consciousness. He became a TM instructor, and the original incentive was citizens diplomacy. However, it's not what I expected, but and we can get into some of the sightings maybe later, or perhaps even now would be a good place. But I was impressed by the rapidity of the contact that we had. I had my first sighting when I went to my first workshop in West Palm Beach, on the Florida coast, Atlantic. And we did the protocols, and sure enough, heavy overcast, a blue-green light moving about 90 to 100 miles an hour flew over us underneath the cloud cover. It was not a meteor. It was not a tracer round from a bullet. I had seen my first UFO. So
let's go right into it, Dr. Joe. What is the virtual experience model?
The virtual experience model is a guide to interacting with the intelligence associated with the phenomena, extraterrestrial, interdimensional. The model addresses the issue of mechanisms of contact. And the model came about as a result of 5 years of intensive interactions that I had back in the 90s, from 1992 to 1997, in which I had multiple experiences observing UFOs and observing other witnesses. And this was called, back then, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. We were part of an initiative, network of contact workers in the Western United States primarily. I prefer the term HICE, Human Initiated Contact Event, for the reasons that we outlined in the first show, which we won't go over. So what I realized as I was going through these contact experiences and leading a contact team in Los Angeles, which was one of 3 in the Western US, Phoenix and Denver were the other 2, I found that there was a discrepancy in what people were seeing while going out in the field. These individuals were sane, sober, many skilled observers, and yet there were marked differences in what people were describing. And as time went on, I realized that the intelligence behind the phenomena was creating illusions. And I'm going to outline the 3 categories now. A close encounter of the first kind is generally a UFO being seen within 500 feet or less. A virtual experience of the first kind is a virtual experience. It's a virtual sighting, and it's of 2 types. It's either a holographic-like projection in which everyone in the field, the entire contact team, can see the object, or what is a visual display, making you think it's an object. And then there's a virtual experience of the first kind, category B, which is the intelligence behind the phenomena targets individuals in the field and is able to create an illusion of either a visual object or, as we heard in the previous hour and a half that we spent together, auditory illusion. These are not hallucinations. From a medical point of view, a hallucination is an illness. It's resulting from pathophysiology, drug withdrawal, drug overdose, metabolic abnormality, alcohol withdrawal, schizophrenia. These are technologically induced illusions. And the one that most contact workers and their supporters of witnesses are going to experience are the visual type. A virtual experience of the second kind is a full sensory, illusory, matrix-like reality. Remember the movie The Matrix? More real than real? Well, what we see from the UFO literature, and especially from the very important free experiencer study, that stands for the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial and Extraordinary Experiences. They carried out an extensive, I think up to 4,000 contact experiencers filled out questionnaires, and many of them described being taken into a kind of matrix-like reality, matrix referring to the movie, where it was not a physical contact experience, it was primarily psychic. So that's a virtual experience of the second kind. The third kind is perhaps the most controversial, and in terms of acceptance for the larger society, I suspect the most threatening. And that's a virtual experience of a third kind, which is virtual memory. I believe, as a result of reading the UFO literature and and my work with contact experiencers who had amazing medical cures, that I believe this intelligence has the capability of creating artificial memories, which are as real to you and me as what we remember we had for breakfast this morning. And this capacity of creating virtual memory or memory implants is important because it allows the intelligence behind the phenomena to access our full storehouse of memories and create memories that we recall as if it was a physical contact experience, but it may indeed be, in this category, totally psychic. So that's the contact experience, the virtual experience model in a nutshell.
And I didn't really know anything about remote viewing or anything like that, but there was one phrase that really stood out to me that I found really interesting. And it was the most common way that they contact humans is in the lucid dream state. And just kind of on a whim one evening, I was dozing off to sleep, and with kind of a subtle understanding that, allegedly ET technologies could pick up on our thoughts, I was just, reaching out, and I was looking back. It was really kind of almost childlike, but it was like really innocent, but I was just asking over and over again, please show yourselves to me. Please show yourselves to me. And I kind of dozed off to sleep, and I just had a flash in my mind's eye. It was just a quick flash, but just two big black eyes kind of surrounded by white light. I kind of like jerked myself awake, and, I looked around, and there's no one around. My girlfriend's sleeping right next to me. And I was like, just kind of thought, well, that's weird. And I went back to sleep. And so that was, it must have been Thursday evening. I went to school that day, and she came and picked me up after work. And like normally I drive, but she's like, oh, I'll drive. And so I was like, okay, cool. And, so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden we're driving, we're in the middle of nowhere, and it was August 28th, 2009. And it was the sun was starting to set. And so I'm sitting there riding shotgun, and all of a sudden I just see this object off in the distance. And at first I see it, and I was like, that's like a weird angle of a plane or something. I kind of look away, I can see planes in the distance. They're all, emitting contrails, all clearly moving. I look back and I was like, that's like a cloud or something. And then I realized what it was. And so it was like perfectly clear evening. So anyways, I'm looking at this thing, and there were clouds in the distance way far away. But then I realized what it was. It was just this disc. It looked like an oval ball of mercury. It was just totally seamless, highly reflective. And the sun was setting off of it. And it was just the most amazing thing. It was just the most profound moment. I knew exactly what it was when I was looking at it. Basically my mind exploded with a flurry of thoughts. I knew that we weren't alone. And, it was really amazing.
And, you mentioned before peak experiences, which is a fascinating subject. So what are peak experiences, and what behavioral changes are generally found in those who have peak experiences, as you described in your recent book, Unseen Forces, the integration of science, reality, and you?
The cork comes out of the bottle. That's a peak experience. Now, how does that happen? Millions of different ways. From seeing a UAP, interacting with the gray, having a near-death experience, out of the body experience, psychoactive drugs, meditation, you name it. It comes in all forms, shapes, sizes. It's a transpersonal event. It's been called many different things: a mystical event, spiritual event. It's depicted in religious texts and folklore. It's in the hearts and minds of those who experience it. And I guess you can say it comes from it's an extreme incident of reality. It gives somebody an aspect of some type of an unseen realm, that unseen force. And whatever it is, these individuals have fierce determination, and it overwhelms them. It can certainly generate a spiritual emergency, which is symptomatic of a peak experience. But these individuals, because they're more aware, for whatever reason, and it could be a physiological brain-based explanation for that. And that's what some researchers are trying to figure out. Is there an area in the brain that somehow facilitates the PE, or when that cork comes out of the bottle, is there actually a structural change at some level of the brain that is integrated somehow with the transformative symptoms that does seem to appear in the form of alterations of personal beliefs and perspectives.
And then I've had experiences myself, and it really changes your worldview, and you're forced to, sort of craft a new paradigm to that, able to put it all together. But specifically, one that comes to mind was around 2005. We were traveling across the country. At the time, we were moving from Tennessee to Washington State at the time, and we were staying in a hotel, and it's so strange. There's so many elements of this that are really strange, and it's funny even thinking about sharing it, because some aspects of it seem absurd almost. Some aspects don't even seem to make sense, but you're there, you have these experiences, and you're forced to confront it, and then you spend the next long period of time trying to figure out what really happened. But to make a long story short, sort of early in the morning hours, before it was fully light, I woke up and noticed someone or some entity at the end of our bed in the hotel. And at the time, we had our young daughter was sleeping in the bed next to us, and my wife was like 8 months pregnant at that time with our son. And so what's strange is I sort of just mentally thought, this must be our daughter who's gotten up and she can't sleep. I just was kind of like, sort of stumbled, like, what else would it be at the end of our bed kind of thing. Got up, and it became very clear it was not her. It was humanoid, looked kind of female, but definitely wasn't her. It was too tall to be her and other things. And what was interesting was this entity this humanoid figure seemed surprised that I noticed it or her, and started backing up away from me. And what's also interesting is my wife woke up and she saw the whole thing too. So this is an interesting piece, because if it weren't for that, I think the entire experience would have been very different. And I kind of doubt that I would even remember it. But what happened was I sort of like pursued this entity towards the wall as it was backing up, trying to figure out what was going on. And it basically vanished through the wall. And, you know, what's bizarre then is you often hear about this. You know, this makes me feel better knowing that this happened, because I've heard this happen many times. People just do really strange things afterwards, you know, almost like their perception or their will is being controlled somehow. Because what I did was I turned around, decided to go, oh, I'm just going to go back to bed. No big deal. You know,
Yeah.
entity appears at the end of the bed, disappears to the wall. Time to go back to bed, not think about it. And my wife kind of shook me and said, what are you doing? You know, how can you go to sleep after what we just saw? And that kind of shook me out of my, you know, my stupor. And then and I kind of like sort of snapped out of this weird kind of state that I was in, kind of trance-like state. And we sat up and we talked about it. And we were like, you know, what was that? And then we just kind of got, you know, freaked out and figured we need to get out of here. So to make a long story short, we got our daughter up and sort of left the hotel early before we even got a chance to have the breakfast or whatever. And what was even stranger was our daughter ended up having all of these sort of marks all over her body, almost like she'd had some sort of, almost like a rash, but it was a kind of like rash that we had not seen before, which was really strange. We checked the bed. There was no bed bugs that we could see, or, you know, didn't look like spider bites or whatever. And what's strange is within about an hour of, you know, being down the road, it completely cleared up and it wasn't there anymore. So I don't know what that was about. Maybe she had an allergic reaction to the sheets. I don't know, but it was strange that it happened at the same time. Another piece that was interesting was my wife and I both saw it, but we saw slightly different impressions of it. You know,
Yeah.
like I remember seeing a full body, and my wife mostly saw just an upper torso. I didn't notice the hair moving, but my wife seemed to perceive it as sort of like moving, like it was blowing in the wind kind of thing. Very strange. You know, we have some aspects that are very similar, almost identical, and others that are slightly different, which again, you often hear in the phenomenon literature. Anyway, yeah, that was a moment that was life-changing for sure. And what's interesting to me is if my wife hadn't been there, I'm pretty sure I would have gone back to sleep and maybe woken up the next day thinking, man, that was a weird dream, and would have never, you know, really carried it with me. I think there's a very good chance that was the case, but because she was there and we talked about it and we decided to get up and get out of there, it stuck with us.
Now, kind of circling back a little bit, you know, UFOs, right? What got you on the path of UFOs? How did you find yourself here?
Yeah, that is always the question. And I think about that still to this day, you know, although I had, you know, I would say that the big, as they call it, ontological shock was I'm outside in the backyard, just smoking a cigarette. And I'm about to walk into my house and I look up. I don't know why I looked up. It's just looking up. And there's a big sideways teardrop that really, it wasn't like there already though. Like I looked up and it came in and out of my field of view. It was maybe as fast as a shooting star, but as big as just like a Goodyear blimp you would see. You know, it was probably, my house is like 35 maybe feet high, and it literally looked like it was just right above it, coming in and out of a dimension is how I think of it now, because it wasn't in the sky. It didn't come out from the sky or anything like that. It just came in and out. And there was a little curve to it. It had some people have been saying maybe plasma type border, but there was definitely a border that was constantly in motion, seemed like it was alive or something. It was filled with a thick, dense, like white substance or whatever that also was constantly moving around and seemed, I guess, alive, but it just came in and out and it was gone. And the only thought I had at the time was, that was pretty crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
what the heck was that? And so, you know, I'm in the house or whatever, and you know, I'm thinking, like, I tell my wife, like, hey, I just saw something pretty cool. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was like a huge, you know, like a meteor or something like that. I don't know, but it was pretty crazy. It was cool, and that was it. I'm outside smoking a cigarette again, and this time, instead of looking, you know, at my house at the door about to go in, I'm just not about to go in. I'm just looking at the garage. So let's see here, the door, the garage would be this way. And I'm under this tree. I don't think there were any leaves on the tree at that point. Maybe there were, but I'm looking at the garage, and the tree's maybe 10 feet away from the garage. And a light comes zipping over my shoulder, just like a, you know. And for whatever reason, I thought that I just had to keep looking. If I just kept looking in that direction, I was about to see what I saw a few days prior again. And sure enough, right over my head and seemingly right over the top of the garage was like the same freaking thing, except a complete ball. So there wasn't the teardrop thing. It was just a complete like ball. And, you know, like the material, the border, everything was like the exact same. And that was it.
Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I hope you appreciated this video, and it's always greatly appreciated if you give us feedback or suggestions in the comments, and you know, like, subscribe, share this video. And we have a Patreon now, so you can help support the channel if you'd like to do that. And you know, stay tuned, because there's a lot more interviews coming this year discussing certainly contact and many other interesting subjects regarding the UFO phenomenon. So thanks again, guys. See you next time.